again, BookTube. It's Mike from Riffraff's Reading Renaissance, and today I'd like to do a reaction video to something Robert G. posted recently, having just read The Hours by Robert Cunningham. He read this book in the wake of the passing of his mother and his mother-in-law, so first of all, sincere condolences, Robert. But I wanted to comment on the fact that he read this book without having previously read Virginia Woolf's Mrs. Dalloway. And the question he raised was whether that in fact would make any difference. I would very respectfully and humbly say I think it does make a difference, because I'm in the rare situation of having read a book that Robert G. has not read, and that is quite rare. So I thought I would just take the opportunity to do a little video about the contrasts and comparisons between Virginia Woolf's Mrs. Dalloway and Michael Cunningham's The Hours, which obviously went on to win a Pulitzer Prize and is now a very successful film starring Meryl Streep, Nicole Kidman, and Julianne Moore, and that's a very powerful combination of big-name stars. So this movie and this book are clearly deemed to be of substance, and I certainly would agree with that. In my reading journey, I was clearly destined that I needed to read Virginia Woolf, and I had heard that Mrs. Dalloway was the obvious starting point. I read Mrs. Dalloway. I loved it. It's a strange book. It took some getting used to. I read it in this tiny little Collins Classics edition, which is convenient for storage, but not the greatest for venerable eyes trying to read small print. The writing, of course, as anyone who knows Virginia Woolf will know, is superb. I thought I would perhaps start by just reading a little passage from the book, and I'd like to just share with you what I do. When I read a book and I find a piece of writing that literally stops me in my tracks, I reach for this rather nice notebook that I have, and in this book I dedicate a page to each book I read, and on that page I rewrite out the prose that has stopped me in my tracks. I'm not going to read from my writing, which is terrible. I'm going to read from the original book in the half light. This is a passage describing the young man Septimus. I'll attempt to do as few spoilers as possible as we go through here, but simply a lot of the book is stream of consciousness, but the descriptions of the characters and their place in society and how they interact is extremely well done. I'll read you this short passage. London has swallowed up many millions of young men called Smith, thought nothing of fantastic Christian names like Septimus, with which their parents had thought to distinguish them. Lodging off the Euston Road, there were experiences, again experiences, such as change a face in 2 years from a pink innocent oval to a face lean, contracted, hostile. But of all this, what could the most observant of friends have said, except what a gardener says when he opens the conservatory door in the morning and finds a new blossom on his plant? It has flowered with vanity, ambition, idealism, passion, loneliness, courage, laziness, the usual seeds, which all muddled up in a room off the Euston Road, made him shy and stammering, made him anxious to improve himself, made him fall in love with Miss Elizabeth Pole, lecturing in the Waterloo Road upon Shakespeare. Septimus was one of the first to volunteer. He went to France to save an England which consisted almost entirely of Shakespeare's plays and Miss Isabel Pole in a green dress walking in a square. That kind of beautiful writing is something to behold. In terms of the comparison between the two novels, I was fortunate that I happened to read them in the right order, and I would also recommend to anyone who has yet to do so that you read Mrs. Dalloway first, and then you read The Hours, and then you watch the 1972 film with Vanessa Redgrave as Mrs. Dalloway, and then you watch the film of The Hours with the three big-name Hollywood stars. If you haven't seen the film already, I think that's the way in which to get the most out of all the nuances and cross-references and the absolute brilliance of both the original writing and Michael Cunningham's writing. Okay, in terms of the intrigue between the two books and the whole conceit and structure of the second book, I need some mini spoilers, but this first round of spoilers I don't think will give anything away that will spoil anything for any serious reader, and I'll give you a big alert before I get into big spoilers. Virginia Woolf in 1930 was writing Mrs. Dalloway in real life. In the Hours, Virginia Woolf is a character writing Mrs. Dalloway. So that's the first link between the reality, the first book, and the second book. Then it gets a little bit complicated, because in the Hours there is a second character called Clarissa Vaughan. Now, the character in Mrs. Dalloway is Clarissa Dalloway, in London in the 1920s, married to a rather dull man called Richard. Clarissa Vaughan, however, is in New York in the 1980s, and she's not married. She's in a complicated relationship with a gay young man also named Richard, and guess what he nicknames her? Mrs. Dalloway, because her first name is Clarissa. You see where we're going? Then the third character in the film is Laura Brown. Laura Brown is in Los Angeles in 1949. So you'll see that the Hours has 3 distinct time frames that it moves between chapter by chapter. Laura Brown in 1949 in Los Angeles is reading Mrs. Dalloway. She's pregnant, and her feelings of repression and disconnection both mirror the characters in Mrs. Dalloway and indeed Virginia Woolf's own personal life. Okay, now we get to the spoiler bit. Major spoiler alert. This is the point at which you put the children to bed and you switch off the TV and all those other things so that you don't get to hear the bits you don't want. Okay? If you've read the books, feel free to stick around and carry on. Otherwise, I would strongly recommend you to read the book and only then come and listen to the tail end of the spoiler alert. I'll keep the spoiler alert label up here so that everybody knows, and we'll switch the video of me into black and white so you can visually see when the spoilers are over. The spoilers themselves relate to what happens in both books. In Mrs. Dalloway, Clarissa Dalloway abandons her ill-advised first love, Peter, and settles for the somewhat repressed Richard, after having had a fling with Sally. In the Hours, Clarissa Vaughan never married her love, the gay Richard, for whom she does still retain complicated feelings. But Clarissa Vaughan in the Hours goes on to have a relationship with Sally, a different Sally, but still Sally. And in a final plot twist, we discover the relationship between the Richard in Clarissa Vaughan's life and the Richie in Laura Brown's life in Los Angeles in 1949. So there is a sort of symbiotic shift constantly between the real life of Virginia Woolf, that same real life as it appears in the Hours, and the relationship between the character of Clarissa Vaughan in the Hours and Clarissa Dalloway in Mrs. Dalloway. It's a fascinating shift. It's brilliantly written, and I think the book is deserving of all the plaudits. I see on the front cover here it won a Pulitzer Prize. All I can say is it was a thoroughly enjoyable read, and I would highly recommend it to anyone. In the two books there, each of the Clarissas, Clarissa Dalloway and Clarissa Vaughan, have a daughter. In the original book, the daughter is Elizabeth, a sort of independent character who constantly challenges her mother's conventions. And in the more recent book, Clarissa Vaughan's daughter is Julia, level-headed and grounded and living in a different era. There's a generation gap in both books, and it works very well. I'd like to read you a little passage from the Hours. I've read you a bit from Mrs. Dalloway just now. I'd like to read from the Hours so you get a sense of the cleverness and beauty of the writing. We have here Clarissa Vaughan is shopping, and she sees some small dresses that she thought she might like to buy for her daughter Julia. And it doesn't quite work out. So let me read it. Clarissa passes a shop and thinks of buying a dress for Julia. She looks stunning in that little black one with the Anna Magnani straps, but Julia doesn't wear dresses. She insists on spending her youth, the brief period in which one can wear anything at all, stomping around in men's undershirts and leather lace-ups the size of cinder blocks. Clarissa walks on, regretting the lovely little black dress she can't buy for her daughter, because Julia is enthralled to a queer theorist and insists on T-shirts and combat boots. You respect Mary Krull. She really gives you no choice, living as she does on the verge of poverty, going to jail for her various causes, lecturing passionately at NYU about the sorry masquerade known as gender. You want to like her. You struggle to. But she's finally too despotic in her intellectual and moral intensity, her endless demonstration of cutting-edge, leather-jacketed righteousness. And then, just to put the icing on the cake, Mary Kroll, the partner, is referred to later as she sees she sees Clarissa Vaughan walking out of the shop. For a moment, Mary Kroll hovers over the lilies and the roses, preparing to be appalled at what Clarissa will spend. It's just endlessly beguiling and entertaining, and the genuine cleverness of Michael Cunningham's homage to the original beloved Mrs. Dalloway is just very, very rewarding, and it's a highly recommended read from me. So just to remind you, read them in the order they were written. It's my strong recommendation. And I would like to thank Robert G. for having prompted me to think about, again, the relationship between Mrs. Dalloway and The Hours. Both brilliant books, but all the more enjoyable when you've read both in the right order. So thank you very much, BookTube, and we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.